How can you move from what's best for you to what's best for others to what's best for everyone? Mended light.
Are you going to tell us?
We're going to tell us and them. So we're talking about overcoming misunderstandings by understanding our own development and that of others, and how we move through different stages of perspective. From zero-person perspective, which is I don't really understand identity or personhood, I just know what I want, to first-person perspective as a young child. I have a sense of identity, I have a sense of self, I know what I want, I know what my interests are, I know what I need in the moment. And then at about age 4 to 6, we start to go into second-person perspective, where we start to engage in perspective taking, what others want, need, and value, and start to build relationships that are reciprocal instead of just what I receive. And then from there, if we so choose, starting in our teens and 20s, but really all the way throughout life at any point, we can choose to go into the objective perspective, which is I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to separate my worth and my emotional investment from the things that I've been taught and the things that I believe. And I'm actually going to assess them objectively and see what is true, what is right, and what needs to be jettisoned or let go of.
And so all of those developmental stages coincide with physical development, right? But how far you go into second-person perspective, how well you understand someone else's needs and see it as equitable and just as valuable as your own is all a personal choice. And everything past that development is a personal choice.
Yeah. And the next perspective for today, we're going to talk about the group perspective, which includes stepping into the group or system perspective, also known as pluralism and paradox. But what it really means is I'm looking out for the group. Like Spock says in Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We're looking at serving everyone's best interest.
Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Movie clip, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Indiana Jones, this is actually the first film in the series chronologically. So it's a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. At this point in the story, Indiana Jones is actually not a hero. He is a greedy grave robber. He is parading as an archaeologist, but he's doing deals with mobsters. He doesn't have a moral center. He doesn't really care about helping others. He keeps repeating as his maxim, fortune and glory.
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
His adventures are all about fortune and glory, fortune and glory.
So that's what he's aligning himself to.
That's what he's aligning himself to, and he comes across this village that needs his help rescuing their children from a cult. He's not interested. I'm only one man, what can I do? But then he realizes, oh, there's treasure. He goes in and he's literally, this is how kind of messed up he is at this point. He goes in there planning to take the treasure and get out. Can't do anything for those poor kids. Just going to get the treasure and get out, fortune and glory. But then he sees what they're being subjected to, and he can't leave. Something changes and shifts within him. He's moved with compassion.
There is morality underneath
deep within there. And if you've seen the movie, he undergoes all sorts of torture and voodoo and all sorts of dark, twisted fantasy stuff. But he comes out of it a changed man.
Indy. Now let's get out of here.
Right. All of us.
चलो उसको उठाओ दूसरा उठाओ
That's your action hero shot right there. Oh, the righteous fury of Harrison Ford. You don't want to mess with Harrison Ford when he's full of righteous fury. It's basically a rule of cinema and life. So now he's teaming up with them, because before they were never going to do this on their own. And there's this great moment right here where Indy, who's kind of been fortune and glory, blah, blah, but you've never seen him happy. And this is the first time he smiles. Right here as he's helping everybody. It's a really great performance choice in terms of what's going on with the character, that he breaks out into a huge smile for the first time when he's helping them. This is what we're talking about today. I mean, he had speaking of the perspectives, right, the stages, he had this belief, which is fortune and glory. This is what he had tied his worth to, and his whole life was about this. And in that objective stage, he took a step back and assessed, is that really who I want to be? Is that really what I believe? And he decides, no, what I want to be is the person who helps bring these kids back to their family. And so that's, the fantastical hero's journey arc, but we're all on a similar arc of who do we want to be? And the highest, healthiest, most supportive, here revealing our bias here at Mended Light, but we really believe in this, is when you take a step back and reassess and realign to a place of what is best for the group and how can we serve and lift each other, which is why we do what we do. It matters that you stop and assess and analyze, who am I, who do I want to be, what do I believe in? The fact is, any virtue carried to excess can become a vice. That you can get so wrapped up in the cult of self-improvement. I'm just using that phrase as, it can be
obsession.
The obsession of self-improvement, that it can start to feel hollow because now I'm never good enough, right? And this goes back to what we've always talked about. You are already enough. So since you're already enough, by all means, figure out who you are and what you believe in, and throughout your life, reassess and recalibrate. But it's also time to stop trying so hard to make things happen and just let things happen.
So along those same lines, I want to share a quote from Thomas McConkie. He said, "We start to realize that no matter where we stand, we're always taking a perspective from somewhere. Depending on that somewhere, we will see things in a particular way, emphasizing this, de-emphasizing that. In fact, reality is so vast, we can never possibly master the truth. If hard-nosed objectivity is the central concerns at the previous stage, then it is what subjectively dances with objectivity that enters our awareness now. The myth of pure objectivity crumbles. We see clearly that there's no such thing as a view from nowhere."
I love this, because even though you could take that step back and try to assess, you're still assessing with your subjective perception. You're still coming from things as you. I had a professor one time talk about the importance of recognizing as a therapist there's no such thing as objectivity. So far better to lead with, hey, these are my values, these are my biases. Do you want to work with me? Or do you want to work with someone whose values and biases line up more with your own?
In my very thinker-closer traits, I've gone through a vast majority of my life learning, growing, loving learning and growing. And I would come across truth and I'd be like, oh, now I know the truth, right? Now I get it. Now I understand. And I can't tell you what it's been like in the past few years of being like, I'm on the spectrum of growth, and in reality, I have no idea where I'm at on that spectrum. Previously, a less aware, less mature version of me was like, oh, I have the majority of truth. And now I'm like, I'm somewhere on the spectrum. I have no idea where I'm at, but I do understand I have one more kernel of truth, and I appreciate that one more kernel of truth. So if I was to use 3 words to sum up this stage, I would call it pluralism and paradox. Pluralism is the recognition and acceptance of diversity within a society, and it implies that individuals and groups, despite their differences, can coexist and participate in social, political, and cultural life of a community without dominating or suppressing others.
And the beauty of pluralism, because I see this all the time and it drives me crazy. If I can get political for a second without taking a political side, every group is just trying to get their own. Their rights are the ones that matter. They have their special interests. And they're paying the senators and the lobbyists. And it's like, instead of pluralism, which is the dominant group doesn't have to suppress the smaller groups. That we can all have rights and our needs matter.
And that there doesn't need to be a dominating group.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not based on size, that every group matters. Just drives me crazy that we can't get there. Maybe if everyone watched Mended Light.
I bet we could. Share. Anyways, so the paradox. A paradox is a statement or an argument that appears to be contradictory or absurd, but may be true or contain an aspect of truth. And there are multiple ways to experience life, and there are multiple ways to interpret those experiences. So why would we limit ourselves to a part or an aspect and call it a whole? That is what we're doing in this 4th person perspective, is not taking aspects and calling it a whole.
And I feel like, again, these all build on each other. One of the things that I love that we've done with our family is we've taken our kids around the world to experience different cultures, to experience different ways of living, different economic systems, different histories, different political systems, and they have lived there and really marinated in them to comprehend them. And I think that is so vital to recognize and to understand that your way isn't the only way. And understanding another person's way or another group's way can enhance and enrich how you practice your way, how you practice your life.
I think that's interesting that you bring that up right here, because as I was creating this series and I was asking myself different questions, I had that exact same thought of like, oh man, I love to go live other places and experience the culture. And that is basically the catalyst for why our families had those experiences. And I was reflecting on, why did I make that decision? Why was it so important to me? Because it's a pretty unique decision to make. Yeah. And I think an aspect of that, it goes back to just by nature and by nurture. I was so clearly and confidently who I was my entire life. Taking my family and going and living in another culture, in another part of the world, it wasn't a threat. It was something I felt like, one, it was something that fascinated me, so the curiosity component. But two, I knew I wasn't going to lose my identity in doing so. I felt physically, mentally, and emotionally safe to make that decision. I think unconsciously, a lot of people identify with their way of living, and going and living in a drastically different way.
Scary.
Feels unsafe. Yeah. Understandably so, right? Yeah. Like, it was just me trying to understand my own human experience and other people's human experience and say, why did I even make that choice? Why was that important? And that's not to say that that's the right choice for everyone to make, right? Because that's not a fourth person perspective of saying, here was the best, most supportive thing for me, so therefore you should do it too. How often do we do that unconsciously, project our fears, our insecurities, or our dreams and our visions onto other people and say, if this is right for me, it's got to be right for you.
Which begs the question, what if we approach life with the energy and focus of, tell me what things are like for you? Instead of just presuming the way others should be, can we relish others? And when I was in this comedy club in college, we talked about doing things the right way, the American way. And it's not just...
That was part of one of your skits.
That was part of the skits. That was one of the jokes, is that the right way and the American way are synonymous, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, far too many Americans have that view, but you do find that in other places, other groups of people, that their way is the right way. So what if instead of that we said, tell me what life is like for you and why you do what you do.
Yeah. Tell me what your lived experience is like.
Can we relish others' beingness and unique perspectives? When we vulnerably open to another person's experience, we can experience the magic of seeing the world through new eyes. At the third person perspective, going back a step, we take ourselves to be unique individuals on our way to something important or somewhere important. This view is partially true. Entering the fourth person perspective, we start to relax more into the moment, letting experience wash over us. We like to feel things change moment to moment and to move with the flux. At one point, we strive to know who we were. Now, we let the present moment reveal new aspects of ourselves to us in a kaleidoscopic flow. I love this entire concept of, we're trying to discover who we are. So we set out to discover, right? Back to Indiana Jones. We're setting out on an adventure to discover who we are. And then we step into, well, I can create who I am. When people say, who am I always respond with, well, who do you want to be? Yeah. But then there's another step to this to add, which is what happens when you step back and let the universe show you who you are. This is so cool. There's so many layers to this.
Well, and that perspective is one of co-creation, right? Of you and the world around you and all the aspects of that. And I just love that. So keeping with this idea, the notion that there are absolute truths that we must cleave to softens. Notice how I say softens. Truth doesn't go away. Where could it go? Like, truth is truth regardless of our perspective. We will still very much respond to truth in this walk of life, but our naive belief that we have mastered the truth, that this is what we call it and this is how we do it, all starts to soften. We realize that truth is embodied in innumerable forms.
So what are the challenges with this perspective? Well, first of all, while we become less goal-oriented and more process-oriented and we relax into the present moment, we're content with letting life unfold and watching things with mystery and wonder. We tend to become more sensitive and inclusive. All of these are good things. We become more naturally curious about worldviews different from ours, but we can go too far with perspective taking and think every perspective is true, which leads to chaotic relativism. As we mature in the fourth person perspective, we learn discernment to prioritize perspectives based on truth and error.
So this reminded me of a really interesting conversation I had with a group of mutual friends. We used to do coaching, entrepreneurship coaching, teaching other people how to successfully grow businesses. And so after we finished one of these retreats, it was me and two other friends, and we went out for drinks. And I don't drink alcohol, but they drink alcohol. You know,
Right.
We sat there, we chatted, things of that nature. And I forget exactly the conversation we were having throughout the day that led to this conversation. But it was one of basically they were taking the stance of moral relativism. And they were like, well, Alicia, nothing is always wrong or always right. Nothing is always bad. And I was like, I'm sorry, but that's just not true. And they're like, well, give me an example. And I just started listing examples.
I think you started with child abuse.
Yeah,
right?
I did. I said any type of abuse, especially towards a child. And I kept going, and they were like, okay, you're right. But this is part of that developmental journey that we go on. In childhood, quite often, we learn strong moral tenets of right and wrong and good and bad. We tie moral belief to non-moral questions, right?
We say
Which
things
are
good-
values.
We say things are good or bad
Right.
when they're not actually good or bad. They're just differences or unsupportive.
Right.
We gave an example in a different video that we did about washing dishes. Like there's a wrong way to do the dishes. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
No, one person values efficiency, get it done. The other person values Sinatra in the kitchen and taking time and just relaxing. But we assign a moral weight to that by saying you're doing it wrong. Now, this is a silly example, but we do this all the time. This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, about things that have nothing to do with morality.
Yeah. And I would say the only wrong way to wash the dishes is if you're breaking them.
Shattering them
right?
across the wall.
I love to dance. I love to partner dance, swing dance, things like that. And so I spend a lot of time doing that. I'm what's known as the follow because I'm the girl and the guy's the lead. And so they have that responsibility. And so guys can get really self-conscious. And so I'm constantly telling my friends that I dance with are new dancers, hey guys, there's no wrong moves in dance, right? And a couple guys, it's turned into a joke because they're like, yes, Alicia, there are wrong moves in dance. And I said, as long as nobody's getting hurt, there are no wrong moves in dance, right?
Yeah.
And as long as we're having fun, then we're doing it right, right? But you think of that analogy with how many people feel self-conscious about dance, and particularly partner dance, right? And if we shift that perspective and say, hey, as long as we're having fun and nobody's getting hurt, we're doing it right.
Right.
But so often we've tied meaning to certain outcomes. And so if we're not getting that meaning in that outcome, then we've judged it as wrong. And that's simply not true.
Well, this leads to the paradox of intolerant tolerance, or tolerant intolerance. They both work, which is that we are intolerant of people who we judge to be less tolerant than us. We have zero tolerance for that. Did you follow me on that? The simple fact is we all have biases and prejudices, and I have watched any number of people see themselves as highly tolerant, but except for this group. And I hate to break it to you, that goes both directions, whatever side of any spectrum you're on. We all tend to be highly more tolerant of the people whose values either align with our own or make sense to us. Those whose values don't align with ours or don't make sense to us, we tend to practice a high degree of intolerance towards. So where do we draw the line? And in my opinion, we draw the line, like what should we be intolerant of? Violence and hatred.
Yeah.
I think if it's violence and hatred, we can say, yeah, I have zero tolerance for that. But other than that, we're denying ourselves opportunities for learning and growth and connection by saying, I only relate to this group of people, these types of people.
And so what are the solutions to the challenges of moral relativity and intolerant tolerance? The solution is, once again, compassion, and a saying that I love, and that is, love is the foundation of all things.
Yes.
Because if the lens which we view the world through is unconditional love for me because of my innate worth, and unconditional love for everyone else because of their innate worth, it cuts all of these challenges right off. Because from that perspective, I do say, I want to learn more about you. I want to understand your lived experience. Tell me what it's like to be you. Because I'm not trying to communicate my values, share my moral perspective, or push that perspective onto anyone else.
Sure.
I'm saying, just tell me what it's like to be you.
Yeah.
Because I want to know you. And when people feel seen and heard and accepted, they feel loved.
Good. I believe. I agree. And I concur. We want to thank you for joining us as we go on this journey towards greater understanding of ourselves and others, and how to clear up these misunderstandings and miscommunications that happen when we stay at these bottom levels instead of working our way up. In our next video, we're going to talk about the next perspective, which is meta-observance. Ooh.
How meta.
Sounds cool.
Is that like Facebook?
No. No. Bad. Do not like what Facebook is doing. I don't care if they know about it. Until next time, folks, keep shining.
We need your light.